Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, October 26, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, writer from the American Prospect, Alex Sammon, will be here to talk about the most expensive ballot proposition in U.S. history. Uber and Lyft's massive expenditure in California to buy all of our labor laws. Meanwhile, White House announces no longer going to fight the pandemic as U.S. hits another day of record infections. Meanwhile, Pence's office is now infected, and Texas and Utah are about to ration ICU beds. The probably exposed Pence will preside over the final Senate vote to confirm extremist Amy Coney Barrett today. With 8 days left, early voting already exceeds 2016 totals. But that may not tell us very much. Post-election, Trump plans to fire heads of FBI, CIA, and the Pentagon. And member of the extremist far-right Boogaloo Boys have been charged with firing on police and inciting violence during the Minneapolis Floyd protests. Chile votes overwhelmingly to rewrite their Pinochet-era constitution. That's a big deal. And stimulus prospects seem all but dead. A Biden win means best case scenario, we won't see COVID relief until February of 2021. And lastly, hopes and prayers. Fox News president and other on-air talent advised to quarantine because of exposure to COVID. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. A pleasure to have you. We are now 8 days out from what we traditionally call Election Day. And as I mentioned just in the headlines, as of yesterday, 9 days out, more people had voted early voting than had in the entire election in 2020. Now, obviously, in 2016, obviously there's a pandemic. And so people are far more keyed into the idea of voting early, maybe getting their ballot and dropping it off. However, this is still impressive. And I think on some level, it indicates that people are very keyed in, not only to the idea of voting early because there's a pandemic, but keyed into the idea of of voting. And we won't know this until the end of day on November 3rd, or maybe even after that, in terms of how many people ultimately turned out, if we are seeing big numbers. But if 2018 was any indication, I think it's fairly safe assumption that we're going to see turnouts that are at the very least larger than we saw in 2016. And I would imagine it's quite possible we're going to see that both in the Democrat side and the Republican side. So it doesn't necessarily tell you anything about the outcome of the election. But it's a good sign just in general that more people are involving themselves in the electoral process. with that said, today we're going to be talking to Alex Sammon about the single most expensive ballot referendum in the history of the country in terms of expenditures. And I can tell you that it's not even 90 to 1, or excuse me, 90 to 10. It's not the gig economy side has outspent the non-change our labor laws for the sake of your profit side more than 9 to 10. I mean, 9 to 1. It is, it's pretty stunning. And we will talk to Alex Sammon about that in just a few moments. I found this pretty amazing. You know, Donald Trump obviously is, he's not staying in and protecting people from getting infected from COVID. He's not doing that, but he is sending some missives from the White House. And this one I found to be pretty funny because they lock off a camera. They go and say to the president, we need to shoot a 60-second or a 90-second message from you that will play online and probably on some of the various cable outlets that will do anything we ask them to do. And we'll put it to music and we'll make it really soaring. Can we write a script for you? No, I don't want to have to read anything. And then they go ahead with that project anyways. I mean, one would imagine they would have done 1 or 2 takes of this thing. But here it is, Donald Trump with one of his closing arguments, as opposed to the vice president whose closing argument was, as head of the coronavirus task force, let me show you how I can have everyone around me catch the coronavirus. But here's Donald Trump.
When I first announced I was going to run for president 5 years ago, I had a theme. It was a great theme. It was a theme that obviously worked, but the truth is I made it work also because we followed that theme. Make America great again. Sounds simple, but isn't it beautiful? And that's what we've done. And then we got hit with the plague. We closed it up. We saved millions of lives. And now we've opened it up and we have a super V. Our economy is recovering faster than any economy in the world. And we went down proportionately less than any economy in the world. But we have another thing that we did that a lot of people don't quite understand, but they know something big happened. And the something big was America first. We put America first for the first time in decades and decades. America first. And I tell leaders of other countries, you should put your country first. When they hear America first, it doesn't sound nice. But you know what? I tell them, I'm putting America first. You should put your country first, whatever the country
Dramatic
may be.
music.
But for us,
over whatever
it's
the country may
first,
be.
And it always will be. Go to the voting booth and vote early and in person. Don't let them take your vote away. The most important election we've ever had. Thank you.
Did you hear the music swell over the underneath him saying, I've told other countries to put your country first? That's a very big dramatic selling point at that point for the American public.
I like the closed captions best, I think.
That is pretty good. That's impressive. They were like, we could actually do this. We just don't need to use any punctuation. I mean, it's very, there is a sense of like, you know, nobody's driving that ship with the campaign. Of course, there's also a sense that there's nobody driving the ship in terms of the administration either at this point. They were doing their best to hide the fact that Mike Pence's chief of staff and others have been infected with COVID. Do we have a running tally of how many people have been infected in that office now? Is it 4? And this is, I mean, they're hiding how many people have been infected in that office because, well, one of the things that would shake the faith of people in something like the coronavirus task force and the administration's handling it is if the point person of the entire operation could not even protect the people who work in his office from getting it. We'll play more clips. Well, maybe we should play this anyways. Let's play this. They have essentially said that we're no longer in the business of trying to contain the pandemic because they have utterly failed at it. We are heading into, we have a situation in Utah right now where they're already starting to plan how they're going to ration ICU beds. And make no mistake about it, if they have to move into a situation where they have to ration ICU beds, what they're saying is we're going to decide that some of the people we are caring for, we're going to have to give up on treating them. We're going to have people die. This is when we heard about death panels during the ACA fight. This is literally a death panel, but there is no, this is just simply, you have limited resources. There has been a failed, if no attempt to contain the number of infections. At one point, it's inevitable. It bleeds, the infections bleed into more vulnerable populations, or frankly, people who just are not necessarily vulnerable on paper, but catch COVID. And we don't know exactly why young, healthy people will end up in the ICU, but it happens. And then your ICU beds, because of the nature of our healthcare system in this country, which is profit driven, you don't want to have too much supply, because you have too much supply that's going to cut into your profits. So you have a limited number of ICU beds and you run out of beds. You run out of beds and you have to make a decision. And what we're hearing out of Utah is that they're getting ready to figure out what that algorithm is, or what that what that formula is. And it's basically younger people get the ICU beds. Older people who have less of a chance of living anyways, through if they're that seriously ill with COVID, they get taken out of ICU. We could see this in parts of Texas. We could start seeing this in parts of the Dakotas. And this is a function of not fighting the pandemic. You can offer all sorts of therapies you want and treatments, but if you don't have the room and the capacity to get people into the hospital, it's not going to make a difference. Here is Mark Meadows, the chief of staff of the president of the United States, basically saying, like, we're done with the whole try and control the pandemic thing. We'll just focus on, what happens after you get sick.
Social groups and family groups. First, it was large groups. Now it's small groups.
It's
now
coming from all sorts of places.
Well,
it's
that's
coming
exactly,
from all sorts of places
that's
because
exactly
the pandemic's out of control.
So here's what we have to do. We're not going to control the pandemic. We are going to control the fact that we get vaccines, therapeutics, and other mitigation.
Why aren't we going to get
areas
control of the pandemic?
Because it is a contagious virus, just like the flu.
Yeah, but why not make efforts to contain it?
Well, we are making efforts to contain it.
By running all over the country, not wearing a mask?
Jake,
that's what the vice president's doing.
We can get into the back and forth. Let me just say this, is what we need to do is make sure that we have the proper mitigation factors, whether it's therapies or vaccines or treatments, to make sure that people don't die from this. But to suggest that we're going to actually quarantine all of America, lock down our economy.
No one's saying that.
Well, they are. Joe Biden's saying that. He says lock everybody down. We're going to have a dark winter. We're going to have a dark winter.
That's what health officials say. That's what health officials say, that it's going to get worse.
No,
that's
Joe Biden's
worst days.
Jake,
let's be honest. Infections, Friday and Saturday.
Let's be honest here. The health officials did not say dark winter. Those were Joe Biden's words.
When we look at a health official, I think he was quoting William Haseltine.
When we look at the number of cases increasing, what we have to do is make sure that we fight it with therapeutics and vaccines, take proper mitigation factors in terms of social distancing and masks when we can. And when we look at this, we're going to defeat it, Jake, because we're Americans. We do that. And this president is leading while Joe Biden is sitting there suggesting that we're going to mandate masks.
The president is holding rallies all over the country.
That's correct. In fact, we're leaving.
No masks required, no distancing. There have already been, according to health officials, contact tracing there have already been cases of individuals in Minnesota and in Washington, D.C., and in Oklahoma that got the virus at these Trump rallies that Dr. Fauci himself called a super spreader event, the one at the White House.
There's also been contact tracing, Jake.
That is not leading.
There's also been contact tracing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what else there is to say at this point. They are just going to say that, like, catch it, roll the dice. And if you're one of the lucky ones who don't have a bad effect, doesn't have a bad effect on you, then you're good. If you're one of the unlucky ones, we will treat you, but we have no plan for situations that are happening like in Utah, where there are so many people who are going into the ICU that some are going to have to be literally taken out of the ICU to make way for people who have a better chance of surviving. I mean, this is... And the idea, like, look, it is increasing all around the country, the world, where winter is upon them. You look in places like the Dakotas, you look in places like Utah, you look across Europe, you look at those temperatures, they're starting to get down to the 40s and the 50s. And we all heard when it hit in the early or late winter, early spring here, it's going to go away in the summer. It's going to get easier in the summer. Well, maybe it did. Maybe it did get easier in the summer. And we are now seeing day after day record number of infections. And maybe it's getting worse in the winter. And the real question is, like, what did we do with those 6 months where it was sort of ebbing, relatively speaking? Did we develop rapid testing? Did we develop a regime for contact tracing? Did we develop strategies for dealing with hotspots? I mean, maybe in some locales, but not in any national way. And they know they're at the end of this, so they just say, yeah, screw it. We're just not even going to concentrate on it. Here he is. He tries to walk back. Meadows tries to clarify this morning on the statement, but in the course of saying it, he sort of indicates that no, actually, what I said was I'm almost double downing on it. Listen to Mark Meadows today from the White House.
Well, the only person waving a white flag along with his white mask is Joe Biden. I mean, when we look at this, we're going to defeat the virus. We're not going to control it. We will try to contain it as best we can. And if you look at full context of what I was talking about is we need to make sure that we have therapeutics and vaccines. We need to make sure that when people get sick, that they have the kind of therapies that the President of the United States has, that we can provide. Those emergency use authorizations hopefully will be coming in very short order.
I mean, he, in the midst of saying, no, we didn't wave the white flag, Joe Biden waved the white flag and his white mask. He literally mocks Joe Biden for doing exactly the one thing that every expert at this point says will mitigate the spread. The statistics run from 95% mask wearing in public would reduce the number of deaths by the end of the year by 100,000, by February by like 125,000. And he is out there claiming we're not giving up on controlling the spread of the pandemic, although I'm going to mock somebody now for doing the one thing that would have the greatest impact in controlling the spread of it. That's his answer. I mean, just even the compulsion of, like, I mean, why, I don't even understand what is the mentality. What do they think they're getting out of this? That there's a lot of people out there, I guess they're just trying to rally all the people who are like, well, we're not going to mitigate this. And I am voting for the president who has come out and forcefully said, we're not going to try and control this pandemic. That's the president I've been looking for. The one who's going to not just not control the pandemic, but make it a point of pride. Pretty shocking stuff. Meanwhile, a couple of messages from our sponsors today. I don't even know why ZipRecruiter sends us any copy, because we have the best ZipRecruiter story that you could possibly have. ZipRecruiter, of course, is a hiring service that helps you find candidates for your job. And right now, all of our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. When you post a job on ZipRecruiter, what it does is it sends it out to over 100 job sites with just one click. And then ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology finds people with the right skills and experience for your job, actively invites them to apply, so you get qualified candidates fast. It's no wonder 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. I am one of those 5. Wait, no, I'm one of the 4. Well, I guess I'm one of the 4 and one of the 5, because I'm 4 out of 5. And Brendan, we found Brendan through ZipRecruiter. I had, I don't know, maybe 10 great interviews, but Brendan was hit it out of the park. And we would not have had Brendan but for ZipRecruiter. And basically because ZipRecruiter went out and grabbed him, saw his activity on job sites, posting stuff, and said, you should apply to this, because everything you're talking about and the job experience you've had and what you're looking for matches. And boom, it was nuts. Brendan walked in, honestly, if I was like to create him in a laboratory, in terms of his skill sets, that's what it would have been Brendan. That's probably the nicest thing I've ever said about you, Brendan.
Thanks, Sam.
You're welcome. Right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. That's ZipRecruiter.com/majority. MAJORITY. You might be stressed out about the election, but you won't be stressed out about hiring when you try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Folks who have listened to this show or watched the show for an extended period of time know that I am sartorially challenged. I don't like to shop. I don't have the greatest sense of style. I'm trying to get a little better. That's why I let Stitch Fix do most of my hard work when it comes to shopping. Stitch Fix offers clothing that's hand-selected by expert stylists for my unique size and your unique size, style, and budget. It's a completely different and fun way to find clothes that you're going to love to wear. What you do is you try on that. They send you pick them out, or you get a stylist who basically gives you an idea of types of clothes based upon your selections and the types of clothes you've been wearing. They send it to you. You try it on. You keep what you like. You put what you don't like back in their box. It's super easy to send it back. You pay a $20 styling fee for each box, and that gets credited toward any piece that you keep. You don't have to have a subscription. You can try Stitch Fix once, or you can set it up for automatic deliveries. Plus, shipping, returns, and exchanges are easy and free, and a prepaid return envelope is included. It's super easy to do this. Stitch Fix has styles and clothing. They have it for women. They have it for men. They have it for kids. They ship all over the U.S. and is available in the U.K. too. I've talked about the leather chukas that I got. I don't know what they're called. They're penguin chukas. Brendan always has to fix my pronunciation on that. And I got a pair of 5-pocket flag and anthem pants, which is the first time I've gone back into that whole sort of like almost like jean cut pants. And I'm actually thinking about going full in on jeans. I haven't worn jeans in years. And I got a mock like turtleneck thing that I sent back. I'm not a mock turtleneck guy, but Mila took my flannel, and I got this Pilsen thermal crew, which I was like, I don't know. This is sort of going back in time for me, because back on my slacker days, it was always a thermal crew. And then, of course, it's winter now. And so I got back on it. And now I think I'm going to head over there and get my winter fix. You can get started today at stitchfix.com/majority. You get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/majority for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. stitchfix.com/majority. All right, quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking to Alex Sammon, the staff writer at American Prospect, about how Uber and Lyft are buying labor laws. We are back on the phone, or I guess on the computer. Alex Sammon, staff writer at the American Prospect, on his piece, How Uber and Lyft Are Buying Labor Laws. Alex, thanks for joining us. This is, and I think when you wrote this piece 2 weeks ago, you had said that this was the largest, the most costly ballot proposition in the history of the country. And I just saw on Twitter, it's being reported by Sam Harnett, reporting on labor and techno-capitalism for KQED, that these gig companies put another $9 million into the yes on Proposition 2. That is 199 433. It's almost $200 million. I can't even do the numbers here. I'm sorry. That's extraordinary.
It's an astonishing amount of money. I mean, it's really like nothing we've ever seen. And the deficit on the other side is something to behold as well. So no on 22 has with a kind of last second push here now has $19 million to its name. So it's a 10-to-1 advantage for yes on 22, and it's some money we've never seen on a ballot level, proposition level ballot initiative like that. It's astonishing.
Why would, and who are the companies that are spending this $200 million? I mean, do we know exactly, or do we have a broad understanding?
Yeah, we know exactly. It's Uber, it's Lyft, it's DoorDash, it's Postmates, it's Grubhub, and there may be another one in there that I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's that class of food delivery and ride sharing startup that are 6 or 7 that basically offer the same service, and they make up the overwhelming majority of that money that they've each individually put up. So this is like the I'm sorry, we lost you there for a moment. We're talking about this is the full-on gig economy cohort, as it were. Yeah, absolutely.
Why would they do that, Alex? I mean, that's a lot of money to spend on an election. Tell us what Proposition 22 is.
Sure. So Proposition 22 is a pretty substantial tweak to labor law at a very basic level. And so right now we have 2 different classes of workers in this economy. We have employees and we have independent contractors. And Prop 22 would create a third class, which is food delivery and ride sharing workers. So those are people who are neither independent contractors nor employees. And it comes out of a law passed in California last year called AB 5, which decided that, basically clarified that workers, drivers for Uber and Lyft, et cetera, are in fact not independent contractors. They're misclassified as such. And that was based on the state Supreme Court ruling from the year before. So basically this law, or Proposition 22, creates a separate category just for the workforce of these companies that would allow them to continue to circumvent minimum wage standards, worker protections, and various other things that every other company is held to in this state.
All right, so this is a carve out from the law, and can we be a little more specific in terms of like what it is that allows them to do, and what it is that EB5 required in terms of that classification? Because if I'm a contractor, versus a paid employee? What's the criteria? I mean, I know there's a little bit of a gray area, but what is the criteria there? And that gray area has been exploited. What is the criteria for a paid employee as opposed to a paid contractor?
Right. So there's a three-pronged test, and this was what was established in this Supreme Court decision 2 years ago, California Supreme Court decision, known as Dynamex, and there are these three prongs, and the first prong is that a worker is free to perform services without the control or direction of the company. The second is that the worker is performing tasks that are outside the usual course of a company's business, and the third is that a worker is engaged in an independently established trade. So those are all that's legalese, right? But you can, even in that definition, you can see that someone who's driving for Uber or Lyft, someone who's doing ride sharing, is not engaged in an activity that's outside of the normal course of business of Uber or Lyft. And so if you hit on any of those three things, you are an employee, not a contractor. And for an employee of a company like Uber or Lyft, that means that they need to pay minimum wage. That means they need to pay into unemployment insurance. They need to pay payroll tax. They need to do these simple things that companies do to operate in this economy. And the idea of doing that was anathema to these companies that already lose a ton of money, and they adding obligations to payroll and such like that was just a non-starter for them. So they basically have been engaged in sort of a multi-year end run around this ruling that has kind of led to this final solution where they realize they've run out of room to make the case that these are independent contractors. So now they're making a separate case that actually they're a third made-up class of worker that will conveniently allow them to not have to pay them as employees, not have to pay minimum wage, to not have to give them basic protections and benefits.
And so, I mean, it's a hard argument to make if you're Uber that people driving cars is outside of the normal course of our business. I mean, that seems like a really difficult, and I guess their argument was like, we're just a platform that, a technological platform that just happens, just by happen chance. One of the things we do is hook up people with drivers of cars. The problem for their argument is that's all they do. And I guess maybe they also say like, well, we also hook up people with driver cars who deliver food, which is also exactly what they're doing. I mean, so it's absurd. And so, I mean, why is this important to an average worker? Because I mean, I think you do a great job in the piece, at least one of them that I have read, connecting the implications of this to not just somebody who's driving a car for Uber in California. I mean, this is not just an end run around California state laws, but like a lot of things, what starts in California ends up moving across the country. What are the implications materially for workers, specifically for Uber at this point, but then we can broaden it out, when you are classified as an employee as opposed to this new classification? You're like an employee, but we're going to give you the rights of a contractor.
Right. So it's precedent setting in a lot of ways. And that's why it's a huge concern, I think, for anyone who works in basically any industry. If you're a teacher, if you're a truck driver, I mean, there's almost no sector that would be immune to this sort of thinking or reorganization if this passes. And so at a material level, the most concerning sort of immediate thing is that the research coming out of Berkeley has shown that if this passes, so part of what they're selling this on is that, well, they're going to pay drivers 120% of local minimum wage for the time that they're working. And that's one of the suite of essential benefits that they're offering. But the actual math, as you do, it turns out to show that workers would make $5.64 an hour driving for Uber, Lyft, et cetera, under this under the situation that would be enshrined by Prop 22. And so they're not paid for the time they're waiting. They're not paid for the time that they're, anything except for the active time they're driving, which is not the majority of the work that they're doing. And so, again, you have this carve out where they're not going to be given minimum wage. They're not going to be given these essential and very basic protections. And if Uber and Lyft can do this, then why can't any other sector? And so it becomes one of these things where, all right, well, why don't we put nurses on this standard? Like, let's only pay nurses while they're actually actively in the room giving care, and any other point in their workday, we're going to keep them uncompensated. Or teachers, everyone basically becomes a substitute teacher. And these sorts of things are extremely destabilizing for workers, because you don't know how much money you're taking home at the end of the day at a very basic level. And that's something, having a steady wage floor is one of the most important things for a person in this society. You have to know how much money you're going to make. And these standards basically set up a whole new regime of employment and labor that is far more precarious than anything we've seen. And something that, to borrow a Silicon Valley term, is certainly scales. And it scales all over the country. It can scale all over the world. And it would not be difficult for them to implement. And that's, I think, why this is such a alarming proposition and why there's so much money behind it.
So we have it's a way of skirting minimum wage requirements, because, like you say, that study, I think, that came out of UC Berkeley Labor Center, that these folks are waiting up to like 37% of the time they are waiting, which makes sense, right? I mean, now I would also imagine that if something like this gets passed, they who's to say that Uber and Lyft don't hire even, or not hire, quasi contract other drivers, and that waiting time can go up, right? I mean, because the service that they pretend they're not offering gets better if, you have more drivers out there, because people are waiting. Their wait time for the driver is less because you've got drivers waiting all over the place. And so their hourly rates can only go down in that respect. And then they're not subject to things like you said, to things like Social Security deductions, and there's no sort of retirement built for them. And that's a cost to society, right? Because at the end of their lives, if they don't have retirement savings, because they've been making, as low as $5.64 an hour driving an Uber, or they don't have Social Security, well, somebody's going to have to pay for them to stay out of poverty in some fashion or another. And that's going to be either their kids or incumbent upon society. So it's going to be a drain on society. Let me ask you this. They're claiming they're going to be even less or more unprofitable if they're required to pay workers. And as a small business person, I understand this dynamic. If I didn't have to pay anybody to work for me, I would be making more money. It doesn't seem like a good argument for why I shouldn't have to pay people. Let's start with this. Why are they so unprofitable now? Like how is this a business if they can't make money at it, even exploiting workers?
It's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. And the way that it's even posited, I think, is fascinating, that, in some sense, the defense of these companies is, well, they have a right to exist, like they should exist. But it's also like, by what standard should they exist? I mean, right, like what company has been able to lose money as prodigiously as these ride sharing startups? I mean, the burn rate on cash is like something we've never seen. It's this conspiracy of historical forces where you have so much venture capital money coming from the kingdom of Saudi Arabia going into a company that has never turned a profit and that seems endlessly capable of losing money in new and diverse ways. And the idea that like an increase in the cost of payroll or the tax obligations that they would owe to the state for unemployment insurance, which I think is an important component of this, it's not even that significant compared to how much money they burn on a regular basis just through their operation. And so it's a great question. It's like, okay, well, why should a company like this get special treatment? Like, what, just because it loses a lot of money, is it exempt from the standards that we hold every other company to? And that's a twist, I think, on like market logic that we haven't seen so far. It's a very strange one, and it's kind of amusing but it's also extremely dark because it turns out that the financial backing that they have is functionally infinite because they don't have enough money to pay wages, but they do have enough money to throw $200 million into just one ballot measure, and it's not even clear if it'll succeed. So it's again, it's a question of power and priority and structuring of the economy in as much as it is of simple profit, and I think that's important to remember.
Okay, so I mean, we've got two separate issues here. It seems to me. I mean, one is like you have these companies that are unprofitable as they are, and and maybe that's a function of like they're just dumping all this money into marketing. They're dumping a ton of money into lobbying that, you could putting $200 million into a ballot measure in one state as part of that lobbying, but they have a huge amount of money. They spent a tremendous amount of money on just hiring former Obama officials over the years, so that they can manipulate the laws. I mean, that's basically what's going on here, right? Is that fundamentally they're saying we have this idea for a business, and for us to make the kind of profits that we need to make, because again, like there's no way that you couldn't set up, let's say, a co-op in some fashion. I mean, and do this at a very low profit margin, I guess, but they have gotten all sorts of tech investment that are anticipating 10x, 100x returns. So their profitability has to be much bigger in the future for their entire business plan to work. And they're basically saying, and I think to a certain extent, all businesses do this, like, we want you to subsidize our profits. Like, we like, and the way we see it with chemical companies is roll back your protections on how clean your air has to be, or how clean your air has to be, your water has to be, so that we can dump stuff into your rivers and it'll be cheaper for us and we'll make more profits. We're seeing that same dynamic, but we're seeing it play out now in this just random business of a supposed tech platform that needs people to drive. Like, if their business was just coming up with the tech, it seems to me, which is what their argument, then they should be profitable, right? Like it's like they get a markup on the rides and that's it. But they're spending a lot of money to undercut our labor laws, our municipal, statutes that protect drivers and consumers, and they want us to pay for it. And so, like, give us a sense of if they're successful at this, at creating this carve out that is just basically like, we're such a vital, I mean, it's almost like some type of national security argument, right? Like, we're so vital to the functioning of society that we deserve special rights to impoverish huge swaths of people. Who else could adopt this? Like, who couldn't adopt this philosophy, I guess, and this attempt at some other state to roll back laws or to do it on a federal level?
Yeah, I think it's important to think about exactly where this money is coming from, and with venture capital money, with private equity money. Why would they not? If you're a private equity firm, why would you not go buy a nursing home, go buy a bunch of nursing homes, and then say, all right, well, this worked for our essential service of food delivery. Why not? Well, let's try it out with the essential service of caregiving or nursing. And so, we own all these facilities, and we have to pay these nurses, I don't know, $12 an hour. But we could pay them $5 an hour in the aggregate and just pay them for the time they're, in the room. And that would cut down our costs considerably. Well, why would you not give that a try? I mean, if it only costs you $200 million to do it, I mean, at a certain point, we're talking about money that's actually not that significant compared to the profit take that a lot of these big financial institutions would win out of this. And so, why not try that on nursing homes? Let's try it out on schools. I mean, teachers only teach, how many hours a day. So let's get them on a system where they're only getting paid for the active time in the classroom. And a lot of that, I mean, we've already seen to some degree in some of these parts of the economy, but it would be something that would formalize that and make it such that you could basically export this anywhere. And given that these extremely deep-pocketed groups, venture capital groups, have the ability to enter sectors of the economy with that much power, the ability to export this labor model, could go a lot of different places, and it certainly would. I mean, there's just no reason it wouldn't. If if that's the cost for you to get in there, in the door is $200 million, you split it 6 ways, it's how could you not? I mean, the incentive is so clear there. And I think that's, very important to think about going forward.
And just like, I want to just touch a little bit too on what they're doing electorally. I got a text this morning from a friend of mine in California who said, hey, you should let people know on your show that Uber and Lyft are giving 50% off rides to the polls. And I was like, oh, that's both a nice gesture and also a great way to get their people to the polls. You have a captured audience. You write in here that every time a driver signs on to his Uber shift, he's got to commit to supporting the Proposition 22. That's just stunning to me. And I presumably in the car and when you get your app, there's a vote yes on Prop 22 thing or something like that. They're doing that on one hand, and it's obviously a captured audience, and it's their people, right? Like they don't have to go out and say, we only want Uber and Lyft users to go to the polls. Well, they're just going to drive them all there. And then you have organization heads, right? Because many of the drivers you write of Uber and Lyft and these sort of gig economies are people of color. And obviously many in situations, some of those people also across the board are low income folks. And you've got organizations out there who are, many are against, but some are for. You write that the NAACP California president, Alice Huffman, is a supporter of yes on 22. And she is, she has some conflicts here, doesn't she?
That's right. Yeah. It's, this kind of gets to I guess this is what $200 million buys you in an election this small, but the cynicism, I think, in the messaging is maybe the kind of most mind-blowing part of this whole thing. And that, exactly as you said, that the majority of drivers are people of color and immigrants. I mean, that's just a fact of the workforce. And yet you see groups like the NAACP and NAN, which is Al Sharpton's group, and I think Si Se Puede, which is another like Latino political group, coming out in support of Yes on 22, which in a very clear way would wipe out the earnings of people that they claim to represent. And in the case of Alice Huffman, who's the president of the California NAACP, she has an arrangement where she has a private consulting firm called AC Public Affairs, and Yes on 22 has contracted her as a consultant and made an $85,000 payment to her consulting firm. And she turned around and has, supported Yes on 22 personally. The NAACP of California has supported Yes on 22, and nowhere will you see that obvious financial incentive disclosed. They've a lot on minority groups.
You're breaking up a little bit there, but I think, I don't know how much $85,000 buys. And, there are times where I guess you could say like, well, I'm already in favor of this, so I'm a good candidate to go and work for them. But it seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest to me. I mean, it's one thing to support something if you're the head of an organization. It's another to monetize that support. At the very least, you gotta make it clear that you're getting paid for it as well, and that you could say that's just a coincidence. Look. So just the one thing that I think is the case that I know, at least in the context of New York, friends that I have who are Black have said that, for years, and I think it's fairly well known, very difficult for Black people in particular to get rides by taxis back in the day where there was no Uber or Lyft or any of these ride, share things. Is there a way that these companies or these services, so I don't really care which company it is, if it's Uber or Lyft, I used to use Juno, that went away. Is there any way for these companies to survive without having to immiserate their workers in this way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's funny that we, engage with them on their own terms. But I think on a municipal level, you could have something like Uber and Lyft be extremely successful, be fairly civic minded, and also pay a reasonable wage for the people who do it. So, if you even just set up a system where you said, all right, if Uber and Lyft are going to operate in our city, they need to give us access to the platform, and we're going to furnish basically a parallel program where we're going to have drivers who work for the city and people pay to use it, and then we pay a minimum wage, and we profit share off of the amount of money that comes in over that at the end of the month. I mean, it's not an expensive operation to run. It does serve a basic purpose, which is getting people around, and it could be oriented in a wildly different way to benefit a lot of people. And so, I mean, there are so many different ways to imagine this service being done for a public good, for a public interest, in a way that doesn't impoverish the people who do it. And we're not that far away from doing that. I mean, it's something that is entirely conceivable. And so to be held hostage by these companies and to even to concede that they're doing something on, out of some sort of racial justice motivation is just, it's totally absurd. And there is a world in which we can have ride sharing, or we can have this sort of transportation system that works for someone other than a handful of investors in Silicon Valley. I mean, it doesn't take a ton of imagination to get there.
Right. This is a fight not necessarily for Uber or Lyft or those type of enterprises to survive, as much as it is a right for them to survive, making enormous 10x, 100x profits on their investments long term. Alex Sammon, from the American Prospect, people can find your piece, how Uber and Lyft are buying labor laws, in the American Prospect. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Sam.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Back in a moment. I want to give you an update on the story coming out of Chile. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. So I don't know how familiar people are with the history of Chile. I guess this is because of maybe this is because of my age a little bit. The story of Chile was fairly formative in my perception of what America's role has been in our hemisphere, at least. And in 1973, the country of Chile was I think it was the president of Chile was Salvador Allende. He was a socialist, and there were American interests that American corporate interests that I guess people in this country felt were in some way threatened by Allende. And by threatened, I mean, like, their profits, their money was in some way threatened. And America was involved, the CIA involved in a military coup that took place in Chile on September 11th, 1973. It led to the death of Allende. And Chile was then ruled essentially by a military junta. Augusto Pinochet was I don't know if you would call him the president. He was the head of that. That rule ended some time ago, but what remained in its wake was a constitution that was written in 1980. Now, one of the during the Pinochet era, one of the people famous for going down there and advising Pinochet on how to reconstruct his economy was a group of advisors from the University of Chicago, often known as the Chicago Boys. They were libertarians with a neoliberal philosophy, Milton Friedman chief among them, and they helped them develop a constitution based upon these sort of neoliberal, libertarian, these words get thrown around, but it's basically saying the privatization, market over people, give corporations the power, and their motive for profit will bring about better social outcomes. What we're seeing with these gig economy companies pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into a ballot initiative to essentially rewrite our labor laws that have existed in this country in some fashion or another for 80, 90 years, some instances more, that this is the ultimate neoliberal project, right? Where it's, we're going to make it as if we're just allowing natural economic forces to dictate, when in fact what we're doing is we're influencing the laws to function in a way that ultimately benefit us at the cost of society and specific workers. And so this constitution has been in effect in Chile for about 40 years. And it called for all sorts of changes to Chile society, privatizing education, privatizing health, privatizing pensions, et cetera, et cetera. And
legislative supermajorities needed for a lot of these things.
Oh, yes. We should also say, speaking of which didn't come up in the conversation with Alex, that Proposition 22, to reverse Proposition 22, you need 7/8, I think it is, of the California legislature to vote against it, to shoot it down. 7/8. A virtually impossible threshold to cover. And enshrining these things, they did it in Chile. In fact, in California, when they had some type of tax revolt there, they did a similar thing. You need a supermajority to raise taxes. What? Why? And same in Chile, which leads to, obviously, you can have the majority of people, even a significant majority of the people, say, we want less austerity. We want more public services. We want health or education or we want these or energy infrastructure. We want these things to work for the benefit of people first. We don't want these things to work for the benefit of profits first. And their system was set up in such a way that even if the majority of people want that, we're going to prevent it because we got in at a time during a military coup, set up the rules of the game to make it impervious to that type of democracy. I mean, let's be honest. We're seeing an iteration, a version of that with the Republicans. They sit in a Senate where the majority of Americans have voted for their opponent, the Democrats. And yet today they're going to enshrine their entire philosophy by putting Amy Coney Barrett on the court. And you see it in states like Wisconsin, where you have Democrats win 56% of the vote, yet Republicans control 65% of the House and the Senate in Wisconsin. And there's several other states very similar to that. So highly anti-democratic, highly a-democratic, if you will, and also policies that reflect that. Well, the Chilean people have rejected, or I should say have voted to approve a rewrite, 78.24% to 21.76%. And they also called for a committee or commission to rewrite this that involves none of the sitting lawmakers that exist today. And it's a completely separate, popularly elected body. And by no means are they out of the woods. It's going to be a 2-year process. In April, they'll elect 155 members, equal numbers, men and women. This is going to be the world's first constitution drafted by a group that has gender parity. They will draft it over the course of 9 months. There'll be an option for a 3-month extension. And then voters must decide whether they accept the new charter in a referendum in 2022. And the draft need only be approved by a majority, as the way it should be. Very heartening story in Chile, and it's one that we should pay attention to. And it's one that, who knows, may be an inspiration to people in this country as we deal with a lot of anti-democratic policies and functioning of our government that's going to be a function of a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court going forward. We'll have more to talk about tomorrow. We will see you then. And for those of you who are sticking around for the rest of the program, we've got a lot to talk about with you as well. We've got all sorts of house cleaning to do. We're going to have a announcement. We've got someone new joining the show. We'll announce that over the next, I think, in a day or two, and they'll show up over, in a little bit less than a week, maybe for our election coverage going forward. More on that later, but I thought I would just throw a tease in there. We are gearing up with the hopes of having a Biden administration and all the fights that are going to be associated with that. There are attempts right now to get Elizabeth Warren as Treasury Secretary. There are attempts, as reported by Politico anyways, that Bernie Sanders has interest in being Labor Secretary. Sort of fascinating development. There is and we will talk more about this going forward, but in Vermont anyways, the governor of Vermont, what's his name? Scott? What's his last name? Can't remember. The governor of Vermont has, Phil Scott, has committed, he's a Republican, but he has committed to replacing Bernie Sanders if Sanders is asked to join the administration with with an independent who caucuses with the Democrats. So net, you don't lose a vote there. I have not heard any such commitment from Charlie Baker in Massachusetts regarding Elizabeth Warren's seat. Now, this is relevant depending on what the outcome of the Senate races are. If you have, and frankly, Joe Biden's stomach to get rid of the filibuster. We should talk more about this. Maybe this would be a good segment to have over the coming days, where we bring somebody on who's dug into this. But essentially, this is the dynamic that's going on. And so, with all that said, and I think I said this in the run up to 2016. It's just that I had the idea of something that has a 15% chance of happening. We just don't generally rely on. Right? If I say that there's a 15% percentage chance of it raining today, you probably won't take an umbrella. If I tell you there's a 50% chance, you probably start getting into the realm of maybe, yeah, I will. 60, 70% chance you're taking an umbrella, unless you like to get wet. 2016, there was a 15% chance, I think it was, by most polling things. I had somebody on who said there was a 99% chance of Hillary Clinton winning. But I think there is a 15% chance, 20% chance of Donald Trump winning. And I don't know, flip a coin. Do it 5 times. But that's not the way it works, right? That's 50-50, right? With a coin. And you got to do it a bunch of times.
Yeah.
What is it that is there a type of coin? You need like a
dice might, a die might get you close.
Exactly. Right. How many is that? There's 6 sides on a die. Yeah, that's pretty close. maybe that's closer to like what, 16%, 17% chance of a specific number. But do it that way. Well, it's craps, right? I mean, it's basically craps, I guess, on some level. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the odds are.
So I'm going to win.
Okay. But I'm looking forward to a situation where we are fighting on terrain that is not between, is not where one of the margins is not like full on fascism. It's a much better terrain to be fighting on. Just a reminder, excuse me. Your support makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. It is your support that keeps this show going. And when you give us your support, we give you extra content every day. We give you the free show, free of commercials. And we give you a warm, cuddly feeling. So, I mean, that's not guaranteed, the cuddly feeling part. But we try. Also, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Oh, and listen, if you are interested in the fun half, but you do not have the resources, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com, but best to wait till after the election because we'll have more time then, and your email will not get lost. We are woefully behind on a lot of these, sadly, and my apologies for that, but we will get on it. Also, don't forget 3 p.m. every day except for Monday, the Nomi Key Show. The Nomi Key Show you can find at youtube.com/the Nomi Key Show. We've got it now, that GNOME. I don't know why that makes it easier for me, but it does. Where's Jamie? Is she around?
She's not in here yet. But
all right. Well, Matt, why don't you tell us about TMBS tomorrow?
Yeah, full slate tomorrow. We have 2 shorter interviews with Eric Osgood and Ryan Pollock. But Megan Day will be the headliner, talking about rural America and healthcare, and also What Is After Bernie. That's tonight, or tomorrow night, I should say, at the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel at patreon.com/TMBS. And also, I will probably be streaming something, I'm not sure what, at twitch.tv/literary hangover tonight. So subscribe to that, Twitch folks.
I wanted to hit something that was a little bit more intriguing, but that's the first thing.
That's a very old-fashioned sound effect.
It is.
That's like from like when my parents were watching TV.
That's exactly, and that's the it's that thing on the horn they got there. That little cap on it. Jamie, what's happening on the Antifada?
Hey, so this week on the Antifada, we had on Pavlos Rufos, a great author and political economist, originally from Greece. He's currently studying for his PhD in Berlin. We spoke to him. We got a little update on how austerity is going for Greece. Spoiler alert, not well. As well as what's going on with the Golden Dawn. How big a defeat for the far right is this in Greece and for the world? The ways the economic crisis lead to right-wing radicalism, and a little bit we talk about COVID because that's on everybody's mind right now. Patreon.com/theantifada. Also on Friday, we released a bonus where we had a little fun with a review of Shrek 2 written by an obscure Maoist sect. And that's out now as well. And look for a spooky Halloween episode coming out on Wednesday.
Wait, what? Shrek 2 was written by a Maoist sect?
A review of Shrek 2 written by the Maoist International Movement. And it's actually an interesting capsule of not just what Maoists think about Shrek 2, but the Bush years in particular, because they talk a lot about the Iraq War in this review.
I have not seen Shrek 2, but now I'm intrigued. But I don't know. I watched Beethoven 1 and 2 this weekend, and I will tell you that movie does not hold up. So I don't think I saw it the first time around, but it was not. I was almost impressed by how not good it was. The number is 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. I am also turning on our IM to see all of you in the fun half.
And for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck 'em. Almost has what? Almost says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
The alpha males are back. And the Africans are black Africans. The alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Okay, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. A couple of things that flashed up on the. We've got multiple IMs things going on. One that I can control. One that I can't. First of all, listener Henry, who happens to also be son of lawyer Matthew, is started being a poll worker in Detroit. Are you in Detroit? I had no idea, but you're going to get a shofar for that. And if that's the case. Important place, certainly, to be doing it. Couple things from this. One, I did not get a haircut. I cannot really honestly explain why some days I'm looking at the screen back to me and it looks like I did, and other days it doesn't. I can't I more or less follow the same hair care regime, as it were, every day, which is, more often than not, I'll shower and I'll just brush my hair. And it's really just a question of like when I'm walking to work, or it changes the hair versus when I am actually just doing it in, my closet. And so that, I guess, must change it, like the exposure to the elements. I'm not sure. So I just want to get that out of the way, because tomorrow my hair could look different and people are like, what happened? I thought he had a haircut. So I just want to.
Got to clear up any conspiracy theories regarding that.
I just want to get that out of the way. I also want to say that the new person coming to the show is not Tim Heidecker. That would never, ever happen around here. Tim Heidecker, I think we all know. I don't think we need to say anything else about Tim Heidecker, except for the fact that in polls, I poll better than Tim Heidecker. So I think people know that. And I also don't want to get people attacking me about my opinions on Beethoven, that movie. It was bad.
Oh yeah, is he a Beethoven booster or other people?
Well, I don't know if he is, but Tim Heidecker, is he a Beethoven booster? No, yeah. The only Beethoven booster I've come across has been my son, Saul, just because it has to do with puppies and dogs, and that's all he's a low bar for this stuff. All right. I thought I had taken the voicemail off. Did I? I didn't. I don't think I did. So there we are. If you want to join the show via the phones, we can do that. Jack from Indiana, realistically, what legislation policy changes do you see happening over the next 4 years if the Democrats flip the Senate? National marijuana decriminalization, ending fossil fuel subsidies, $15 minimum wage, adding Supreme Court seats, etc. I'm hoping for the best. Expectations are low. I think that's a good approach to take. I think a $15 minimum wage, I think is very likely. I would also say that very early on, they're going to pass a major COVID, you want to call it a relief bill, you call it a stimulus bill, whatever it is. And I would anticipate, and if you look at Biden's got a $1.5 trillion bill for, Green New Deal light, if you want, or you can call it light. I don't care. But it involves, a lot of hiring a lot of people for transition, energy transition. There'll also be a lot of people hired, I think, for contact tracing and whatnot. Tens of thousands would be my guess. And all that's going to happen in the first 2 weeks under a reconciliation bill. So they will not have to get rid of the filibuster. The next big question is, do they get rid of the filibuster? Harry Reid came out today and said you should do it in the first 3 weeks. It's conceivable they will, because they're going to have to pass some, I think they're going to do a lot of major voting rights legislation early on. And then I think it depends on how much of the Green New Deal light they're able to pass in the context of reconciliation and roll it into a COVID relief bill. I would imagine it's not going to be huge. They're very, very timid with this stuff, but who knows? And then I would think that most of the work is going to be a function of that. And I think they're going to try and expand this sort of what sounds a little bit like a Medicare buy-in. I'm not quite sure about that. I need to read in more and sort of see. I don't have a sense of I have a sense of what Biden has proposed, but not a sense of how people are talking about it. I think there's going to be maybe some fixes to antitrust, and certainly, but these fights that are happening right now, who's going to be labor secretary, who's going to be treasury secretary, these are going to have important implications. I don't know if they will expand the court. I don't know. It may take a couple of rulings before they feel they can, which I think is a mistake. I don't think the American public cares. I really don't. And now, but I think they should expand the court. I mean, that's why I think they should have, I don't know what they could have. There's a couple of things they could have done maybe to push this this vote that's happening today into the lame duck, and that would have helped provide that predicate. But and then there's going to be just I think even like there's going to be there's going to have to be a tremendous rebuilding of things like of the Labor Department, of Health and Human Services. There are people apparently like resigning in droves right now. You're going to have to rebuild the EPA and the FDA and the things like OSHA. And I mean, it's there's going to be a tremendous amount of work that has to happen on the executive side, not just legislatively, but I would imagine you're also going to see some changes to the tax structure. Nothing radical, but maybe capital gains will get a different treatment than it has been on par with wages. And I would also like to see an expansion of Social Security, and I think we'll get that. I mean, I think all these things are going to be, from our perspective, half or 1/3 measures, but they're going to trend in the right direction. And where they land, I don't know. But then it's also a function of like, you know, all of that will be happening, but simultaneously, the left has to be building an infrastructure and stronger power to when, you know, 2022 comes, to take out some of like the more conservative Democratic senators. I mean, that's the next big thing, right? Like you can take out the Engels, then you could take out the Crowleys. That's big. We want to get some of those people into more position of power. We want to increase the size of that caucus. I mean, I'm convinced by 2022 or 2024, there's a different name for that caucus than the Progressive Caucus. That what we call the squad now is going to have its own. I mean, it is essentially a separate caucus now, but it will function that way, hopefully. Yeah. And then the question is, can like groups like Justice Democrats et al., can they take out like the Kristen Cinemas? And so that's like the sort of the next frontier.
Yeah. I would only add, when we're talking about trying to predict what kind of legislation, hopefully what kind of progressive legislation is going to come out of the new Congress, the really big X factor is social movements on the ground, right? Like the next big thing, I think, and I hope, is going to need to come sooner than 2022, right? Because if we have a Biden administration that's trying to do austerity in the face of this economic crisis as a way to kind of right the ship, we need social movements there telling them no. We need a giant, we just saw a giant uprising against the police, the scope of which this country has never seen. So hopefully we'll be seeing more of that, and we'll be seeing more left organizing and building of institutional power independent of either of the political parties that, among other things, has the power to primary conservative Democrats.
I would be really surprised if we see austerity measures from this administration coming in. I would be really, really surprised, to be honest with you. I don't think that they're going to expend as much as I would want them to, but I would be surprised if we see. Now, it's not inconceivable we may see that 3 years down the road, but they're going to have to spend money. We are, this is analogous, at least in terms of the need. I would say it's probably greater. The size of the need, maybe not the urgency is a little just meltdown of everything. I would be surprised if they don't pass a legitimate $2 trillion package, $3 trillion package in February. And that's not going to be, 70% tax cuts. If anything, they're going to raise taxes on wealthy people, which technically is an austerity measure, supposedly, but they're going to spend that money immediately. But I think that we're not going to see, austerity in terms of like, they're not going to cut back on programs. They're going to put money into programs.
What about Pelosi, Pete Peterson style deficit? Like,
I just don't think that I'm not saying that she wouldn't be inclined to do that, but I think that I think Biden's tune has changed. I think that the things that we were hearing about that were maybe a little bit more oriented towards, getting elected. Like, they can't get into office and not pass at the very least, the House bill. I mean, how can they? Unless you've got people in the Senate, but Chris Coons is not going to be able to get away with that. But there could be others who are in the Senate, Democrats, who say we're not doing this. But I think it's hard for me to imagine that you're going to find Republican senators who are going to set up a gang of 6. You know what I mean? Or a gang of, or 7 that they'll need to fight reconciliation. If you got 55 Democratic senators, all you need is 51 for a reconciliation bill. So you can have 4 douche nozzles, go off and say well, I don't think we should be spending this kind of money. We need to tighten our belt or whatever. I just I think at the very least, there's a perception that by these politicians that era is past. Pelosi can attempt to push that, but I think that would be real pushback. It's just who is there's not even a pretend constituency anymore for this. I don't know what gives them any cover, right? There's no place to do that. I think I could see it coming later. I could see it coming in the run up to the 22, election, where you start to hear, this kind of talk. But I just think it's going to be the first 2 years. I just don't think that you're going to hear people going we can't do this because we're worried about the deficit.
Yeah, in the run up to the midterms through the suburbs, do you not feel like that would be an effective tactic to run against those suburban moderate Democrats?
I think that's when we start to hear it. Now, we're going to hear it yesterday from the Republicans, but I just don't think we're going to hear Democrats talking that way until the end of 2021.
Yeah. Well, they're not just trying to win votes, right? They're trying to fix the economy, and a lot of these people have no idea what they're doing. So in that sense, I think a lot of them really do believe in the deficit, and they really do believe that it's going to be a problem if they do too much deficit spending. I mean, they're flailing about all over the world for economic solutions. Like our guest from the Antifada told us this week, they tried austerity in a lot of European governments, and it didn't, quote unquote, work, right? Being defined by fixing the economy, not by, human flourishing. So now they're turning back to some kind of Keynesian stimulus amid this massive, massive crisis. And if that doesn't work, I don't know what they're going to do. But it would not be surprising to see that tried in the U.S. as well.
Long-term listeners of this program will remember that when it first started, I was going on Dylan Ratigan's show on a weekly basis on MSNBC in the afternoon. And I would literally end the show and walk up 6th Avenue. And I distinctly remember in 2000, maybe this is it's 2009-ish. And we saw Europe attempting austerity. And, we all said on the show, this is going to be the experiment. We're going to have a running experiment on austerity because the U.S. started out not pushing austerity in 2009. We passed a huge stimulus. Well, not big enough, but we passed stimulus. And the Europeans went with austerity. And within a year, the results were really clear that the austerity had failed. And I kept saying, hey, wait a second. I just remember sitting on the show saying hey, didn't we keep saying we were going to check in on this experiment? Well, that experiment failed. And yet Ratigan was talking about a $55 trillion unfunded liability. That's his famous rant, which was, mixed in with this sort of anti-establishment stuff that was fundamentally reactionary anyways. And when I asked him about it, he had no idea where that number came from. And it was also a bullshit number. But it was like, wait a second. We said multiple times on the show, we have an experiment. Why aren't you going back and looking at the results of that experiment? Well, I know why. Because it's run contrary to what your buddies who sell bonds have been telling you. The lunatics you bring on this show. David Stockman came on and was like, PIMCO has sold their bonds. America's about to go into Weimar Germany type of situation. And then you know what happened? No, it didn't. It's just that the economy came back much slower rate than it would have had more money been spent, and which actually translates into material immiseration for millions of people. The difference between expending, I don't know, a couple $100 billion more early on could have meant improving the lives of millions of people. Marginally, and in some cases, much more so. So I don't know. I mean, these are, they seem like sort of like small petty details, but like broad trends, super important. And I think at the very least, at the beginning, we're going to be okay.
But don't give up on organizing, folks. Just because Trump is out of the White House. I mean, hopefully nobody listening would.
Jim Botex says, you say austerity failed, like you understand what the purpose was. No. Well, I do think, look, I do think there are people who buy into, well, it depends on who you're talking about. There are people who buy into this notion of like, you got to tighten your belt like a family does if you're a government. The people who push it, like the Pete Petersons, maybe the Nancy Pelosi's, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. And it almost is irrelevant. There are definitively people who push this agenda because austerity does things like depresses wages and provides for wealth inequality and structures our economy and our world in such a way that a certain segment of the population get all the benefits without a doubt. And so I know those people exist.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to talk,
but wait, let me just, my point is that this person suggests that that it is wrong to talk about it on the level of how it impacts people, because the people who are pushing austerity, at least at its core, are not interested in providing benefits for the vast majority of people. They are actually interested in the exact opposite. They are interested in providing benefits for a limited number of people, which definitionally means you don't provide it for the vast majority of people. That I agree with. But my point is that from a, and I feel like we point that out. I mean, I think I've been looking back on the early shows. Literally the first guest we had on the show was author of Winner Take All, I think it was, about the economy. And this was in 2011. It was basically talking about this dynamic, maybe not so much in that language, although a little bit. But from as a political matter, in terms of talking to the widest number of people, they assess that they have bought into this line that austerity is a mechanism for helping the economy. Yeah. And so
the Reinhardt and Rogoff paper was pretty damaging. And a lot of people cited it as
over and over again. It was just it was a spreadsheet error, essentially. And that is the thing. You know what? Maybe we should do when the time comes, maybe we should get Rorty Baum on and bring him on to walk us through that, so that people, because it does, the fig leaf story does matter. It is important to disprove that, because I can tell people that there's a narrow set of people out there who are able to dupe other people on this. That I don't think has the same salience with most average people who don't follow this stuff as here's evidence that prescription doesn't work. That you don't need to necessarily. I'm not saying this is the case, but I'm saying as a rhetorical matter, as a political matter in fighting it, you don't need to necessarily say that this is an idea that is propagated by a narrow set of people to enrich themselves. Or you don't need to exclusively say that. You can also say it's an idea that doesn't work. And in some instances, that can be more effective. It just sort of depends on the audience you're talking to on some level, too.
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with most of that. At the same time, you cannot talk about neoliberalism as a purely ideological project, right? Because it doesn't explain why these ideas took hold exactly when they did, when people had been trying for decades and decades to, enforce this new project on the world, right? Like the neoliberal turn of the 1970s that we talk about a lot was a response to this massive crisis of profitability that was taking place. Oh my God, my doorbell's ringing. I'm going to ignore that. And, it was a time when the managers of capitalism were looking for new ideas. And, oh, hey, guess what? We have this great one prepackaged by all these guys going back to Bretton Woods and whatnot. And they tried it. And, to some degree, it did work in the sense that it kept the capitalist economy moving into a new regime of accumulation in the 1970s and beyond. But in terms of what's going on with it now, I agree that that's not necessarily going to work this time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there was an agenda. There was the Powell memo. There was a bunch of other memos written at that time as a result of, I think, of what you would describe as the falling rate of profitability. I mean, there was a lot of other things that were going on at that time too, in terms of social emancipation movements and the sense that we are losing power on some level because people have less economic insecurity than they've had in maybe any time in the history of the country. The 40s, or I should say really more the 50s, were an expansion of wealth, and what they call the Great Compression. And so there was a lot of, I think, things that were happening at that time. And Chile was like a big part of sort of, a proof of concept program. And in some respects, that's what they tried to do with Iraq too. Like Iraq was, people should read the Naomi Klein had a piece in The Nation 2004 or 5 or something. And it was like year 0, I think it was. And in many respects, like Iraq was the next step in piloting, a neoliberal full privatization agenda. Whereas Chile was in many respects like, hey, let's send down Milton Friedman down there and see how these things work down there. You get past the whole part about the military coup part and being necessary. We can figure out to create our own dynamic that's similar to that. All right, let's go to the phones. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, John?
I'm good. Yeah, since my last call on Wednesday, Trump has slightly tightened the gap in Arizona, where Biden leads by 2.2, North Carolina, where Biden leads by 1.5, Wisconsin, where Biden leads by 5.9, and Florida, where Biden leads by 1.6. Trump now has extremely narrow 1-point leads in Ohio, Georgia, and Texas, while these states have moved slightly towards Biden. Pennsylvania, where Biden has a 5.4-point lead, Iowa, where Biden has a 1.4-point lead, and Michigan, where Biden has a 7.9% lead. So my numbers in 2006 showed a much closer race than forecasters, and I'm seeing that again. Though Biden has leads in Arizona and Iowa, while Clinton wasn't close in those states except for Arizona. Old school forecasters don't list percentages of candidates winning. Instead, they label races toss-ups or leaning towards one candidate. Out of the 10 swing states, this election, I would consider 7 of those states as toss-ups. But Biden has leads in 7 of those top 10 swing states. So the 3 formerly blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, all have Biden polling averages with leads over the margin of error. So Biden also has leads in 5 swing states that are within the margin of error. So I still think most forecasters and media outlets are overstating the chances of a Biden win. Yet I still give Biden a 75% chance of winning, mostly because of his strength in the formerly blue wall states. In Senate races in North Carolina, the race is tight.
Hold on, John. Let me just stop you there for a second. One thing that I've noticed, okay, and then you will get to the Senate. One thing that I've noticed is that when I compare Clinton leads in 2016, I did this over the weekend again, 2016 versus Biden leads in 2020, I do see that in more instances, Biden is over 50%. Even if he's got a smaller lead, he's over 50%. And we don't have a Gary Johnson or a Jill Stein in the race. I mean, we have versions of them, but they're not, they don't seem to have the same measure of traction. And so Biden's over 50%. And to me, that seems, I don't know how, I guess I'm asking you, how do you look at that and quantify the value of that? Because even if we don't believe the natural tendency of voters to break to the challenger at the end of the day, voters who are undecided going into the polling booth, as it were, even if we don't believe that and it splits 50-50, to have Biden at over 50%, even if it's like 50.03, seems to me to be pretty significant in terms of impacting his chances of winning a given state. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the two things that we've talked, that everybody's really talked about the most is that the number, I talked about this in my last call, the number of undecided voters are much less. And obviously with all the huge vote count that's already happening in the in-person vote count, which is like, that's only supposed to be 22% of all votes are supposed to be early in-person votes. And yet look at how many people, we're setting records all over the place. And so, I mean, those are added also with the mail-in ballots also in a lot of calculations. But I mean, you just see the lines also. And so, yeah, I mean, I would agree. The two biggest factors in that are the lack of undecided voters and people who have already voted, and then also the lack of third-party vote. I mean, you just don't even hear about third-party vote hardly at all anymore. To where that was a big factor. A lot of people were talking about 6% in Wisconsin was from third-party vote, third-party and more. I mean, Green Party, Libertarian, and other parties too, plus write-in votes. And so yeah, those are the biggest factors. And you're right. I mean, Biden's. I'm just looking at some of the Florida numbers right now, and he's right at 50%. The new poll just came out, so I was trying to get a new polling average before the call started. But he's consistently 50%, 49. I mean, the one poll that Trump has a lead in, he's at 50%. So I mean, some of them though, he's at a little bit less. So I mean that definitely is important.
All right. Well, so go on with the Senate. Tell us about the Senate, John.
Yeah. So the Senate races in North Carolina, the race is tightened. Cal Cunningham lead is now down to 2.8, and so that's
why are these things tightening?
More
people heard about Cal Cunningham's sexting, or what? What's going on there?
I think part of this is just, I mean, this tightening that's going on in general is, this is a common phenomenon about states that are more or less, they go back home. This is called coming home. In other words, they start considering people from the opposite party. But as it gets closer to election day, you have people who come back to the party that more or less leads in that state. And I think that's what's happening in the states that I said we're tightening in the presidential race also, which are Arizona, North Carolina, and Florida. And even though Wisconsin's tightening a little bit, I mean, the lead is still pretty big there at 5.9. So I think that's what's happening. Those red to purple states are starting to go more towards red. And I mean, the sexting thing, I mean, I'm not in the state, so I don't really know. I mean, at first it wasn't affecting it at all. I mean, I've seen Republican operatives say that they are trying to push that. It seems ridiculous considering that Trump, paid money to a porn star. But I mean, that's the old Republican playbook, though. So in Iowa, Democrat Teresa Greenfield's polling lead has decreased to just 1 point over a cult of Trump party, Joni Ernst. In Georgia, Republican David Perdue has increased his polling lead to 1.6 over Democrat John Ossoff. And in the special election, which is a jungle primary that has 20 candidates from different political parties, Bernie Sanders endorsed Raphael Warnock now leads with 32%, and cult of Trump loyalist Doug Collins is now in second place at 23%. And the appointed cult of Trump Senator Kelly Loeffler is at 22. So the top two, if you don't get 50% plus one, that's not going to happen, they're going to have a runoff on January 5th. And so
who do we want to? I mean, obviously, you want Warnock to win, but they're going to have a runoff. Who is weaker? Who has a higher ceiling? Is it Loeffler or Collins? It feels like it would be Collins has the higher the lower ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, the polling has Warnock at 2.5 over Collins, and then at 4.5 over Loeffler.
Oh.
So yeah, I think Loeffler has the scandal with the.
That's okay. That's opposite of what I
thought.
From
earlier in the year. Yeah, earlier. Yeah, I mean, Collins is crazy too. Everybody knows that. He just put an ad out to where he's like promoting, Michael Flynn and all these people that have, been convicted of crimes, trying to promote them as these people are promoting me, and this is, this should be something that's a positive. But I don't know. In a general election, I think that's a terrible thing.
I do too. But, and particularly one, this election, we have to say, is going to happen after Trump has either won or lost, right? I mean, the runoff. This is assuming Warnock doesn't get above 50. And so the loss or victory by Trump will implicate that election, it seems to me. And I think it's going to be harder if Trump loses. I think there's going to be less a rallying around a Collins than there would be a Loeffler, right? Because, but who knows? I don't have a sense of that. I would imagine that's going to be a highly contested race because they're going to see that seat is hugely important. We'll see. But John, you got anything else?
Yeah, another thing is that, the Ossoff-Perdue race, they have a law there saying that if in Georgia you have to get 50% plus one. So, I mean, the Libertarians polling, Shane Hazel is polling at about 4%. So, I mean, if you have a race where it's a 1.6% win by Perdue, I mean, that's also could go back to a January 5th runoff. And, with these Senate races tightening, some people are saying that the control of the Senate could be determined on January 5th, way after the election. So, I mean, I don't think so. I think they're going to win. I mean, I think Jamie Harrison, he set a record. Now he's raised over $100 million. That's the all-time record. fundraising by any Senate candidate.
How much did Dianne Feinstein contribute to Lindsey Graham? Do we have those numbers? Did she max out when she contributed to Lindsey Graham? Do we have those numbers? I'm just guessing. I haven't seen the numbers, but I don't know. I would imagine she would have given, what is the full maximum that you can give in the general election? Is it $2,500 or something like that? Because I would imagine, why would Dianne Feinstein not back up her praise of Lindsey Graham without some money too, right? I mean, in for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah, that's a good point. A good point.
Well, John.
One thing. Okay.
Okay. But we will talk to you soon.
Okay, sounds good, Sam.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, bye-bye. We will be featuring, and I believe we're going to be the only show, we better be, exclusively bringing you John from San Antonio. No other show will have that on Election Day. So don't forget that, folks.
He's our secret weapon.
Secret weapon. Oh, here's the other secret weapon apparently people are deploying. This whole thing about 80, where are we now? 85,000 cases a day now. We've set a record almost every day this week. 85,000 coronavirus infections on Sunday. I don't know if today we will actually beat that record. But Sunday's record beat Saturday's record. Saturday's record beat Friday's record. Friday's record beat Thursday's record, and so on and so on. And
number one, baby.
Now, of course, what is driving this? Is it the cold weather? Is it the lack of contact tracing? Is it that the White House has admitted over the past 2 days, we're not interested in controlling the rate of infection. We're just not in that business anymore. We're done with that. Is it those things? Or
I'm going to go with freedom and liberty.
Or is it freedom or liberty? Or are people getting paid to say that the infections are going up? Here's Donald Trump with that theory.
Some countries, they report differently. If somebody's sick with a heart problem and they die of COVID, they say they died of a heart problem. If somebody's terminally ill with cancer and they have COVID, we report them, and doctors get more money and hospitals get more money. Think of this incentive. So some countries do it differently. If somebody is very sick with a bad heart, they die of COVID, they don't get reported as COVID. So then you wonder, I wonder why their cases are so low. This country and the reporting systems are really not doing it right. If somebody has a really bad heart and they're close to death, even if they're not, but they have a very bad heart and they get COVID, they put it down to COVID. Other countries put it down to a heart. So we have to be. We're going to start looking at things because they have things. They have things a little bit backwards. They have things a little bit backwards. Joe Biden is made.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are we going to start looking at things? Are we going to start looking at things now? Now that we're 7 months into, 8 months into this, we're going to start looking into things. Now, you know how we know that other countries are not counting COVID if someone has COVID and they die of a heart attack? You know how we know that? Because they're counting COVID. Otherwise, we wouldn't know that person had COVID. Is he saying that we're not really having this many deaths? We're counting all sorts of deaths as COVID deaths. The people have COVID. And they're dying if they barely know they have COVID. They barely know they have COVID. They're dying of something else. And all these other deaths. I mean, contemplate the idea of just the psychosis involved in suggesting, well, first off, if you think that our medical system is somehow incentivized to say monetarily that people are dying of COVID, what is it about our system that does that? Now, honestly, I don't even know, where is the huge amount of COVID benefit that gets to hospitals? Where is that? When you have the highest rate of death of COVID of a hospital, how is it that you get more money? You get more COVID relief funds? Is that it? It's not based on infections? because obviously these other countries are counting infections, or you wouldn't know that they had 2 things wrong with them. Like it's almost like if there was a mandate from that we could impose on politicians, regardless of whether they're in elected office or non-elected office, that whenever they go out to give a speech, there has to be like an ASL sign interpreter or something like that, or maybe just someone who holds up cue cards, who just says, like, I want everybody to think about this for a moment. What he's saying doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's not just a lie. It's just like, 2 + 2 equals 5 is a lie, but it's also very obvious that it's a lie. And then it's also just sort of repulsive that he would say at this point, where you have like so many people in the medical profession who have died of this because they have exposed themselves in the course of doing their job to help other people, that this is just a function of them getting more money. But if hospitals are somehow getting more money, like maybe we really should look at the structure of the hospitals and how much they pay.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what does he think that the hospitals want this money for? Even in his formulation, where hospitals with more COVID deaths do get more money, does he think it's just going into the pockets of the administrators?
I mean,
like
the doctors.
Why are hospitals
doctors
begging for money in the first place?
The doctors get more money. I mean, look, we have had a consolidation in the hospital industry, as it were. And a lot of this consolidation is by major corporations that do what all major corporations do, is they try and increase their profits by cutting staff, by cutting services, by jacking up prices on people. And it's exploitation of their workers. And it's a diminishment of services for people who have less money. There's no doubt that's going on. COVID is not the driver of this. It is that we have a messed up system that allows for this stuff.
It's what I've been saying. You got to get the profit motive out of healthcare, folks.
Exactly.
They've gamified the system, folks. They've just gamed it out.
I mean, it's
also,
and it's also just like the idea that a hospital gets more, more money the more COVID deaths they have is just absurd. It is founded on nothing. The point is, you want the money before the COVID deaths come anyways, right? Because that's like how you prevent the deaths on some level, because you're not like having a crushing wave of people come in. But it's just, man. I mean,
well, Mark Meadows told us earlier that we should not try to control the number of deaths from COVID. So I don't see what the big deal is.
Well, Meadows probably got a lot of money invested secretly in those doctors who are inflating their COVID things.
Yeah, we're just following the Hippocratic Oath, folks. First, do no harm. So we're just going to make sure we don't do anything bad to the economy.
Hey, let's tune in and check on how Blexit is going. I don't know if you remember Blexit. This is the exit of black people from the Democratic Party and going to vote for Republicans. There's I can understand why why some members of the black community would be, frustrated with a guy like Joe Biden and Democrats at large. Similarly, I am also frustrated by the Democrats and Joe Biden, maybe not necessarily for the same exact reasons. In many respects, someone like myself was not in any way implicated by the policies that came about for the things like 94 criminal reform bill and all those extra cops on the streets who needed to figure out something to do. And so they just started to basically harass young black men as a matter of policy. But here is Jared Kushner making the pitch to black people. And the pitch basically is, you're just not good enough to appreciate Donald Trump.
Coming forward, there was some substance to it. And why did you go forward with it? Why did the president go forward with it?
So, look, there's been a lot of discussion about the issues that were needed in the black community for the last.
Can I just tell you, if you're just not watching, you're just listening, the the pitch, the Chiron pitch for this segment is Ice Cube defends Donald Trump. I mean, can you imagine like any other news organization? I don't know. I guess maybe there's been like, I guess maybe you saw like Lady Gaga supports Bernie Sanders, but it wasn't like they bring out a campaign official. It's like, could you talk about Lady Gaga supporting Bernie Sanders? And this is the news peg for this. I guess it's just like a huge like news flash. We have another black person who is defending Donald Trump. We should talk about that. All right, sorry from the beginning. I think that's a pretty funny Chiron.
Reality.
So, Jared, when did you realize this isn't just a celebrity coming forward? There was some substance to it, and why did you go forward with it? Why did the president go forward with it?
So, look, there's been a lot of discussion about the issues that were needed in the black community for the last years, but particularly it intensified after the George Floyd situation. And, you saw a lot of people who were just virtue signaling. They'd go on Instagram and cry, or they would, put a slogan on their jersey or write something on a basketball court. And quite frankly, that was doing more to polarize the country than it was to bring people forward. You solve problems with solutions. And one of the things I respected about Ice Cube is he actually went and said, okay, what are the policies that are needed in order to solve the problems that everyone's complaining about? And he put forward his proposal. We were connected through some mutual friends, and we started some discussions. He came in to meet. We said, look, we've been working on our own plan to solve these problems. We got together. We were able to take him through all of President Trump's accomplishments, whether it was accomplishing criminal justice reform, opportunity zones, the funding he provided to HBCUs, and then we took him through a lot of the different plans that we had for what President Trump could do in the next 4 years. And I'm a big believer in iron sharpens iron. It was a really in-depth and respectful policy discussion. There were some things we didn't agree on, but there were a lot of things we did agree on. I think he helped make our plan better, and we appreciated it. And again, one thing we've seen in a lot of the black community, which is mostly Democrat, is that President Trump's policies are the policies that can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about, but he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful. And what you're seeing throughout the country now is a groundswell of support in the black community, because they're realizing that all the different bad things that the media and the Democrats have said about President Trump are not true. And so they're seeing that he's actually delivered, he's put up results, and a lot of people want to get on board to start working with President Trump, because they know that, unlike most politicians who have been in Washington for decades, who talk and say all the right things, President Trump may not always say the right things, but he does the right things.
So first off, you got to really want success to get it. And there's a lot of folks in the black community, they just, opportunity knocks and they go, I'm sorry, I'm too busy, I can't answer the door. It's an interesting pitch.
Those basketball players who write stuff on the court don't want success, even though they've become professional athletes at the highest level. They're
fighting success. First off, we'll tell you that that Trump did not save HBCUs. That was legislation that was passed. He did not stop from signing it, I guess. So that's good. It was the Future Act.
You're welcome.
Congress passed that in December, and it was both Democrats and Republicans. But you also have an executive order that Trump signed just, 3 weeks ago, prohibiting federal funds from being awarded to agencies or contractors promoting racial or sexual stereotyping, according to them. So it's unclear in that regard. But just that concept of like, if black people don't appreciate this, it's really just their fault. I mean, he said the same thing about the Jews on some level too. So there's a lot of whining that's going on at the White House. Why don't they love me? Why don't they love me?
Also, opportunity zones is one bit of like corrupt policy that has been buried, I feel like, in this administration because it's very traditionally corrupt. But it's basically a slush fund and a tax write-off for any sort of real estate developer who wants to build, low income or luxury housing in low income neighborhoods, basically.
Right.
Gentrifying bill.
We're going to pay you.
It's like Jared Kushner saying, I'm giving myself some money here.
Exactly. We're going to pay you to make obscene profits 10, 15 years down the road.
Look, they're giving people the opportunity to be priced out of their neighborhoods. Okay. I'd say that's pretty generous of them.
It's we're going to put you in the zone. Hey, we were talking a little bit earlier about the idea of austerity. I'm sure all of you are so tired of hearing the Republicans bemoan the deficit like they have been for the past, 2 or 3 years, and fought so desperately against those massive tax cuts that ballooned the deficit, just utterly ballooned the deficit at a time where we were starting to get some measure of like job growth that in the aggregate had begun to build up, right? I mean, the trend went through all the Obama administration. The Obama folks, they pivoted to austerity in 2010. They didn't put enough in for a stimulus. These were all contemporaneous critiques, at least on my part, and certainly by others at the time. It was not that it was not that obscure of a or marginal perspective on this. But after 8 years of solid growth, solid but incremental, the numbers were up, and then the Republicans were like, wait a second, we got to get in here and have a massive tax cut. It's not like we're going to be facing any type of major economic crisis. What are the chances of that happening? Really slim? What are we going to do? Get a pandemic that's going to basically make us, half our businesses go out of business? Forget it. Major tax cut for wealthy people, and then a small tax cut for everybody else that will expire way before that permanent tax cut for the wealthy people. And then you heard all the cries, all those Republicans who voted against it because it was going to balloon the deficit. That last part is the only fabrication. However, it looks like they're not going to pass a stimulus before the election. And if Joe Biden wins, the Democrats are going to have to pass this stimulus by themselves. That's going to cost trillions of dollars, desperately needed to energize the economy and keep people from starving or losing their home or so on and so on. And all of a sudden, Ted Cruz, it's like his alarm bell went off. Yeah, I set my alarm for 4 years from now to see if we should be worried about the deficit. And here's Ted Cruz.
Mick Mulvaney had a great quote. He said, the deficit's the worst thing in the world when Barack Obama was president, but Donald Trump came in and, we're not so worried about that anymore. He's right, isn't he?
So look, I'm very worried about the debt. And I'm worried about it under Trump. Now, to be fair, Trump didn't campaign on cutting the debt.
He did. He said he was going to eliminate the national debt in 8 years.
He also said something, I'm the king of debt in 2016.
Right.
He also said that Ted Cruz's wife was ugly. But, and
your dad killed JFK.
And your dad killed JFK. I mean, listen, it's important as a politician to sort of like absorb these things and then let them get cleansed in your body as they pass through. And that's what he's doing. That was, you got to hand it to Swan. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of him, but he does come in and sort of, it's not hard to anticipate what these guys are going to say, but he must have anticipated that Ted Cruz would say 100% absolute opposite of what the truth or the reality was. I thought Cruz was going to respond when he goes, but it's only been 4 years. He didn't say he was going to reduce the debt in the first 4 years. That's what the second 4 years is for.
No, he went straight to look. He says a lot of things, okay?
That's right.
Yeah, he objectively campaigned on the debt there. It doesn't matter that he campaigned on not doing the debt also. Right? Like, he doesn't even it out and make him not campaign on the debt when he said he would have gotten rid of it in 5 or 8 years.
Well, he said he was the king of debt, so he understood debt. Therefore, we will not have debt.
Right.
I hope after Trump is safely out of office, he still serves the one function he's good for, which is humiliating people like Ted Cruz over and over again.
That is, we will miss that without a doubt. What else we got? Oh, the right keeps pushing this lie because they know how horrific it is, and they have no response for it. There is a lawsuit being brought by people who represent 545 children who these lawyers for these children cannot locate the parents of these children. DHS claims, well, we've located the parents of most of these children, and they don't want their kids. Now, there has been a huge litany of lies from DHS surrounding these kids, from when the program started, what the purpose of the program was, whether they had planned to reunite them, et cetera, et cetera. Here is Tucker Carlson basically saying, we believe the DHS because it's much more convenient than the idea of how horrific the reality of this is.
But back to the debate last night. At one point, Joe Biden told us that hundreds of these children brought here by coyotes, possibly dragged, have been separated permanently.
Pause it. These children, for them to be separated from their parents, were not brought by coyotes. You cannot separate children from parents unless they're brought here by parents. Just listen to what a disingenuous, lying piece of garbage this man is. Go back to the beginning. If you're brought by a coyote, that is a parent sending their children there. That is a genuinely unaccompanied child. This administration called kids unaccompanied if they came with their parents and they said to their parents, you crossed the border. I don't care. You're asking for refuge. It doesn't matter. We're separating you. Now the child is unaccompanied. They redefined what unaccompanied means. Children separated from their parents are not brought to this country by coyotes. They are brought with their parents. Now, the parents may have hired a coyote. It doesn't matter. They're here with their parents. That's how they get separated. All right, started it from the beginning. This guy is such an unbelievable liar. We can't even go through 3 seconds without it.
But back to the debate last night. At one point, Joe Biden told us that hundreds of these children brought here by coyotes, possibly dragged, have been separated permanently from their parents by the Trump administration, which hates families. 545 children, to be exact. Now, if you believe that was true, you'd be upset about it, so you'll be happy to know it's not true. It's not even close to true. The vast majority of the parents of these children have been located by federal authorities, and they're refusing to reunite with their children. A DHS spokesperson says that in one lawsuit currently pending, the plaintiffs have been able to contact, quote, the parents of 485 children separated at the border, and yet, quote, they've yet to identify a single family that wants their child reunited with them in their country of origin. Oh, so it's more complicated than Joe Biden told us. In many cases, the parents in question are not in the United States. They're still back home at their country of origin, usually in Central America.
All right, he's conflating. I also think that he very well may be conflating different lawsuits, because the lawyers of the 545 kids explicitly say we cannot locate the parents. And if you, DHS, have an ability to locate these parents, then tell us. Then tell us these parents. And they're not still in their home country. That implies they've always been in their home country. To the extent that these kids can't find their parents, it's probably because the parents were deported and the DHS knew that their children were still in the system, and they did nothing to make sure that they could retain some record or connection between the parents and the children. This guy, now, to be fair, I don't want to say that Tucker has no empathy whatsoever, because wasn't he rejected by his mom or something like that? Isn't there that story?
Yes, exactly. I'll share the screen here. Spotted by Cody Johnson. I think we've heard this story before, but this is from a New Yorker profile of Tucker. His mother, a Bohemian, left the family when he was 6 and ultimately settled in France. The boys never saw her again. Totally bizarre situation, which I never talk about because it was actually not really part of my life at all, Carlson says.
Well, I mean, so maybe it makes it easier for him to feel like it's not that big of a deal. It's very possible these kids are separated from their mom, who goes, moves to France, and their dad marries some type of heiress, and everything works out great. It was a fairy tale for Tucker Carlson.
It's not that big a deal. I'm not crying. You're crying.
Yeah. If you lose your mom, just have your dad marry a frozen foods heir, and he'll get a bunch of jobs in Washington D.C. and Voice of America and stuff like that, and you'll be set. I don't know what people are complaining about.
Boom. So from his perspective, maybe that's why he has just a rather narrow vision about it. There's a lot of potential that a lot of these they just decide they don't want to do that. Apparently, they decide they don't want to do that.
The deception I'm starting to realize now when he says 485 have been contacted, it's not 485 out of the 545 that are missing. It's 485 out of 1,500 separations where 500 were not considered part of the lawsuit, but 1,000 still were, and 485 have been contacted. Most have not. The 545.
Right. I mean, that is exactly the game that he's playing. He's talking about a different set of people. It's like Donald Trump saying, look, 200,000 have died, but 2 million have not. I've succeeded. Nobody talks about the 2 million who have not died. It's unbelievable. This is Clay Higgins. This is unbelievable. This is just amazing to me. These people are just out of their minds. Where is he? He's a Republican from where?
Louisiana.
Clay Higgins. This is his argument about masks. Why we shouldn't be wearing masks. You know what it is? His wife had a bad dream. My wife has the gift of premonition. It's unclear whether this is a premise to what he's saying or this is proof. Last night, she dreamed. I feel like we need some music for this. Do we have like a theremin or something like that?
It's like in poetic form, too.
Can we get like some type of theremin or, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, something like this?
I can look for. Oh, you got some?
No, that doesn't quite do it. Last night, she dreamed that federal squads were in our home, seizing guns, knives, unauthorized foods. I wonder what unauthorized foods are.
Yeah.
Trans fats, big sodas.
Exactly. And stored water. They said we had been reported. You've been reported for having trans fats and stored water. Becca, that's presumably his wife, awoke crying. What happened to our freedom? She asked. What indeed? Oh, that's good. Let's do that again.
Sam, can you do it this time with your best Cajun accent?
Last night, she dreamed that feral squads were in our home, seizing guns, knives, and unauthorized foods, and stored water. They said we had been reported. Becca woke crying. What happened to our freedom? She asked. What indeed happened to our freedom? What is he talking about? Masks? Where there may be a mask mandate, and now they're taking stored food.
Well, the mask mandate, I mean, it's the first step towards the communist revolution, I think, right? That's what Lenin said, if you read him closely anyway.
Have they landed on whether or not this is communism or if it would be, Sharia law, since like the mask is a face covering, like we go full burqa at some point?
They took our see-through masks. We bought those special vinyl ones where you can see the face, but they took them because we don't want anybody to see your lips.
Yeah, I mean, Sharia law and communism are pretty much the same, so
okay,
it doesn't really matter which one they're synonyms.
Isn't that why you say left communism? Because you don't want people to get confused with Sharia communism?
Yeah, like regular communism is just the Sharia kind.
Interesting. I love unauthorized foods. That's my favorite. And the quotes around it.
Yes.
And the quotes around reported.
What is he
eating? I'm just a big
eating?
fan of unnecessary scare quotes in general.
Yeah, what is he eating that he's so worried about?
endangered pandas,
frozen corn dogs.
Anyway, he's on
Jim
the
Baker foods.
Pigs in a blanket.
They're going to take away meat too. Don't forget.
Taking away meat.
Yeah. The good news is Congressman Higgins serves on the Homeland Security Committee.
Oh,
So-
good. Oh, good. It's not like there would be anything that would be a challenge to our freedoms coming out of that committee, I bet.
Yeah, I've had a similar vision to Clay Higgins' wife, but it is not doomsday prepping Republicans who get raided.
No, it's
I love the idea. I mean, I love the idea that they have now sort of retreated to just like dreams are proof of what's going on.
They're going to come seize our avocado toast.
Religious freedom has gone too far.
All right, let's play this one last clip here. Here is AOC referring to Joe Biden's insistence he's not supporting a fracking ban. Now, in 2050, his plan calls for, by then, the end of reliance on fossil fuels, period, end of story. That, I think, frankly, in my opinion, is too long of a time horizon. I think it should be earlier. I think we could do earlier. But when they talk about a ban on fracking, nobody says, like, nobody puts a timeline on that either. I think we should be able to do quicker than 30 years. Some people say that's a ban on fracking in practice, not necessarily in rhetoric. Here is AOC responding to that question.
To be completely candid, Vice President Biden's position on the issue of fracking has been confusing. During the primary, he sounded supportive of a ban. On Saturday, he told voters in Pennsylvania, quote, "I'm not banning fracking, period." It sounds like now he's on the other side of this issue from you. Does it bother you?
It does not bother me. I believe, and I have a very strong position on fracking. The science is very clear. The methane emissions from fracking are up to 64 times more powerful than CO2 emissions at trapping heat in the air. And just from a perspective of stopping climate change, there is a scientific consensus. However, that is my view. Vice President Biden has made very clear that he does not agree with a fracking ban. And I consider that, it will be a privilege to lobby him should we win the White House. But we need to focus on winning the White House first. And I'm happy to make my case, but I also understand that he is in disagreement on that issue.
Do you worry that his opposition to a fracking ban is going to hurt young voter turnout?
Well, I believe that young people right now have a very disciplined activist mindset, and they are not here with the intent of voting for their favorite person or voting for, someone that they think is perfect as president. I think young people are actually quite disciplined and quite realistic and pragmatic in their vote, and they want to vote for who they are going to lobby. Right now, young people are so clear on their stances on many political issues that they believe that they want to vote for a president that is at least going to be receptive to their advocacy, activism, and protest, frankly. And so, there is no question that Joe Biden is a much better person in that position to be receptive and actually listen to the voices of advocates than Donald Trump, who is intensely focused on enriching himself and his friends.
So,
I don't know what better response you can have as a politician in that situation. I honestly, I don't know. And the idea that we have a politician who is at least willing, and she did that when she came on this program too, when we were talking about the HEROES Act. She has the I don't know what you call it, the ability to be frank enough with, like, look, I'm not going to pretend that this isn't part of the process and sell the process on its own terms. I have not seen a politician who is willing to come up there and say, this involves some measure of compromise. And that compromise is we're not getting what we want in Joe Biden. We're getting the opportunity maybe to get what we want with Joe Biden, as opposed to foreclosing that opportunity with Donald Trump. There's no doubt in my mind that if Joe Biden was proposing a fracking ban, that there would be 5 times the number of stories on CNN by Jake Tapper or whomever saying this could be why Joe Biden's going to lose Pennsylvania because of the fracking ban.
Yeah, I mean, Tapper's good at splitting the left, but the fact of the matter remains that there's a reason AOC ran against a Democrat like Crowley, and there's a reason she did it in the Democratic Party. And frankly, there's no contradiction here.
Right. And the thing is, he's trying to split the left, and she completely, it seems to me, neutralizes it. And the flip side of that is it becomes a huge story that Joe Biden is pushing a ban on fracking in Pennsylvania. He's going to lose Pennsylvania, and that becomes the big story. And they're pushing it. That's the way they discipline. They don't have the opportunity to discipline people about taking that stance on fracking, and it leaves open the opportunity, because it's one thing to take a position on, it's another thing to actually do it, right? And to actually do it, you're going to need a lot of agitation and a lot of political pressure on you in office. It's far more likely we're going to get the political the pressure in this circumstance than in any other, it seems to me. But
do you think she's right about young people?
That they're that disciplined? I think to a certain extent. I mean, I think that I think there are definitely people who are going to be motivated to not vote because of the lack of a fracking ban. I definitely think that's going to be a factor in some cases, but I'm not convinced in Pennsylvania where it's going to be most important if it is. Like, I would say that that if you were to come out with a ban on fracking in Pennsylvania, it's conceivable that you would lose more votes than you would gain in Pennsylvania, right? Like, I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know. This is speculation on my part. It's conceivable in other places. It may cost them some votes, but I also think it's likely that most of those people are not watching CNN.
Yeah, I mean, she's been optimistic about the youth vote. I mean, that's the best case scenario for it, that they have that approach to it. And I don't think it's the fracking ban that, to the extent that Joe Biden depresses him, I think it's probably like the things about student loans and stuff like that. But I think like that's what she has to say.
Yeah,
Right.
and to the degree that young people are watching, it's actually a pretty smart way to talk to them, right? Because
Of course.
AOC is saying young
Be
people
disciplined.
have a disciplined activist mindset, and what disciplined activists do is they vote for Biden and oppose him from day one. And you don't want to disappoint AOC, do you?
No, I
Like,
think
whether or not you agree with her
I don't.
politics, she's very smart.
I think that's exactly what she's doing, and I think it's smart. And look, I still think we're going to see close, if not 2008 levels. I think we're going to see probably the second best youth turnout that we've had. And I think we had the best youth turnout. I think was 08 with Obama. So it's not necessarily like, in 8 years has made a big difference, I think, in terms of how politicized younger people have gotten. But I'm not convinced it's politicized all younger people, or the people who vote have become more sort of like specific in what they're looking for. I don't know.
Yeah, and being politicized among young people is statistically less likely to result in voting and more likely to result in participation in street movements and whatnot.
All right. We're not going to. I know it. I know people mock me all the time for saying this, but we don't have much time for calls today. I'm sorry. 774. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Colin from Brooklyn.
Colin from Brooklyn. What's on your mind, Colin? Maybe we should do Colin, what do you think about maybe Wednesdays becomes like a calls only segment? I mean, just all calls. I can't possibly do that.
People would appreciate that.
Yeah. I don't know. All right, Colin. What's on your mind?
Quick thing to say before I get to my question. I've only watched David Pakman's show once, and I found it to be terrible.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
you know what? I got to say,
Seder all the way.
listen. Everybody has their own personal tastes. Obviously, David Pakman has more subscribers. He's doing much better numbers on us than on YouTube. We may cater to different audiences.
Yeah, not everyone is
Gotcha.
sophisticated enough to watch the Majority Report.
I mean, let's be honest. This is a bit. We try and make the show a little bit exclusive.
There you go. So my question kind of has to do with the conversation about Uber before. And I kind of want to bring into the discourse about that another kind of labor-oriented profession, the restaurant industry, which I'm in. And, you know, I find that this past year, the restaurant industry, or the past couple of years, the restaurant industry has tried several movements to move away from a tipped wage economy to a more traditional way of compensating employees that has to do with benefits and, you know, all these things. And the restaurant industry is a very hard time doing that in a way that I foresee this industry having a difficult time doing it. And the big reason about this is that the PR campaigns that are anti-labor have a very good way of positioning themselves as pro-labor and kind of finding advocates to create narratives around that make it seem like their advocacy for business is really on the behalf of labor. And I just wonder, a two-part question is, do we have statistics on the resulting jobs lost, you know, or the speculative job loss for this policy if it's passed on people? And if that is going to be a big problem, do you think it's incumbent upon the left to attack this from a solution-oriented position where you acknowledge that the people in these industries are operating within their own kind of capitalistic microcosms and often can't sustain, you know, any immediate loss to their livelihood in service of like a larger movement? And I think that's kind of something that we miss in a lot of these kind of small labor movements. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I imagine Uber and Lyft have put out some type of figures as to what this would cost in terms of jobs or in terms of revenue. I don't know, but I don't know how you would measure this, right? I mean, because what is the baseline? Is the baseline where it's at right now? Is there any doubt in anybody's mind that without these classifications that Uber and Lyft will continue to not hire more of these contractors and because they don't have a vested interest in these people making money? There is no vested interest in Uber or Lyft as a company in these people making a decent wage, because they can just, you know, there's almost an infinite, you know, churning supply of people who may need work at any given point. And if it's sub minimum wage, sub $15 an hour, you know, people are going to take it if they're desperate. And so, but I know what you're saying, you know, in terms of statistics, but I think it also has to be like, you know, I mean, understand what's going on here. You have a company that cannot achieve profitability unless it doesn't pay. Let me put it this way. I don't know if people remember this, but back in I must have been 2012, maybe 2013, I got offered an opportunity to host I don't know, maybe it was on like 12 stations across the country, a radio show from 3 to 6. And the guys with the proposition for me came to me like, we're going to be partners. Okay. And they said, you know, Ed Schultz was leaving radio and we're going to get you ads and this and that. And we're going to be partners. And it's going to be, but it's going to be 60 days before we get you paid, because we got to wait for the ad revenue to come in and this and that. I'm like, all right, I'll do 60 days. And, you know, because we're partners. And these guys are putting in work too, I guess. And so I would finish this show. I would run uptown and I would go and I would do another 3 hours of the show. And I did that for a couple months. And at one point they come to me and they go, maybe it was about 40 days in, it was a month and a half. And I'm like, so what's the story with the revenue? And they're like, well, we haven't sold any ads yet. And I'm like, well, if you haven't sold any ads, that means that we're at the very least this cycle and then 30 days out from getting paid. So I'm not going to get paid. I've been working for free now for, I'm doing 6-7 hours a day of just being on air, never mind all the production stuff. And I'm not getting paid. And I'm like, this is not a sustainable business. And they go, no, it is sustainable. We're keeping it alive. And I'm like, we're keeping it alive because you're not paying me anything. It's not a sustainable business. A business requires that you pay your workers, and it should require, and we have set the bar too low, but we have set the bar as you need to pay them a minimum wage in this country. The minimum wage happens to be too low, but the concept is introduced that it's not a job unless you pay a bare minimum of money. Just in the same way that a car is not a car unless it actually functions for a certain amount of time before it needs repairs. And health insurance is not health insurance unless it requires certain things. And so they have created an industry whose success is predicated, at least in the way that they're defining success, is predicated on paying their workers essentially not a salary. It doesn't qualify. What they're paying their workers does not qualify as a salary because we as a society have defined what salary means. It doesn't mean I can pay this person 1 penny an hour and I'm paying them a salary. We don't agree with that concept as a society. And they've set up a business that's done it. And instead of trying to figure out how they can run their business by paying people what we consider a legitimate salary, they're just going and trying to redefine salary to mean something less. And so it's really hard, I think, and they've had a lot of success to get to the point where we actually where that dynamic is obscured because they've paid so much money in marketing and lobbying and having voices out there that present themselves. There is a way to do their business in such a way that people actually make a living wage and do so within the construct of how we have workers make money that could function. And if they can't figure it out, that's on them. But I understand what you're saying. It would be great to look at these numbers, but all the numbers are fictionalized anyways, because we don't know. We don't know.
Well, even in cases,
for the record, sorry.
Even in cases where it's like a very clear choice laid out for them, like the bosses, the business owners say, okay, well, we can implement these standards, but then we're going to have to cut jobs. Like that's a thing that the companies will be doing. They're not actually obligated to cut jobs, or, if they can't function using minimum standards of labor rights, which I think are actually way too low. Maybe you don't get to function that way. Like if you can't function without child labor, should you still get to operate? No, I don't think so. It's on the same continuum.
Yeah, for the record, I 100% agree with that sentiment, and I'm definitely on that point. I've just seen the PR power of the implications of. Sorry.
I know what you're saying. I guess my point is it's not a question of an argument to counteract it. It's a question of them spending 20 times the amount of money that unions are, and or any labor advocates are, and so really it's like. This is a hard argument. I haven't seen any hard data of what you're talking about. It may exist. But the only thing that I could say is, like, if they're supposedly not hiring people now because they're not employers, right? Like, then they can't really fire people. And if their argument is we're going to have a lesser amount of people working, well, it's just going to mean that there's more demand for their services. And supposedly that's the way their business model works. It's you get per drive, per ride payment. But these are all sort of like, I understand what you're saying, and I'll keep my eyes open on that.
Yeah, I think the guy who called in the other day might have been a real person who really believed the disinformation campaign. So I understand where this question is coming from. Like, how do you talk to these people? But also, yeah, it's important to hammer that the numbers that Uber is publishing are totally fictionalized. Like their desired wage that they pay their workers is zero because they made a bad bet on automated cars that has not paid off yet, and that's why they're raising all this insane venture capital. If they were just like, hey, we're starting an illegal taxi company, you guys want to invest? It's the future. Like, no, that wouldn't happen.
And here's the last thing is that there is absolutely zero reason to believe that if this was to pass, that Uber and Lyft wouldn't take advantage of this to the extent that they would drive down even existing wages. This is basically voting. And not only would they drive down existing wages in their industry, this will happen in other industries. This will set the precedent for other industries. So within 5 years, they're driving a car for Uber or Lyft. They can be sure as hell that there's going to be, X times as many competitors, which is going to drive down their wages even more. But there's no incentive and no protection for these people for Uber not to do a bait and switch. And the one thing these drivers do understand is that Uber has done this bait and switch in the past. A lot of people got burned by investing and thinking that they were going to get these same percentages from Uber. And there's no protection whatsoever from that not happening again under this regime. Yeah. And so that's the only thing I could say in terms of like a substantive argument in that regard. But appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah. These companies, they want to pay their workers as little as possible and have to give them as little as possible in the form of benefits. So that's just how capitalism works. So it does not make sense that they would be spending millions of dollars to try to pass something that benefits their workers in any way.
All right, folks, I'm sorry. We do not have time for any more calls. It is obviously 3:00, 2:45, and we just don't have any time for calls. And I apologize. Took a couple of calls. Cannot hang it. Oh, there we go. But we will take some IMs now. I'll go through a bunch of these, see if we can get through them. Melancholy. Prop 22 gets me so angry. When Uber threatened to leave the state, I said, right. They were leaving the place with the worst public transport in most cars. Not going to happen. They're always finding a workaround to treating workers fairly. I'm a former print reporter turned web designer in the Silicon Valley. I was laid off in 2008. Won't go back as an employee because of how mangled the job market is out here for non-engineers. California told tech companies that if they required workers to be on premises, work specific hours and do specific jobs, they had to classify them as employees. So what happened? Employment firms sprang up. So when the Apple recruiter emails me, the job description says I will not be an Apple employee, but I'll be an employee of another firm with inferior pay and health insurance, and I will be required to work at Apple at specific times. So I get all the bad parts of employment and none of the flexibility of being a contractor. We've got to work on it.
I've had jobs like that.
Gen Z, you're literally 25 years old, but we will not take you out when we make the boomers dance. You're literally 25 years too old, but we will not take you out when we make the boomers dance to gunpoint for our entertainment. Also, you're pretty cute in an older than my parents kind of way. Well, I appreciate that. The fact is, I am not a boomer. I'm not a boomer.
Don't argue with them. You're going to make them angry.
If you haven't heard, the leftist streamer Vaush is debating Tim Pool in studio tomorrow on Tim's live show. Vaush is a very good rhetorician and debater, and so it should be good. Yeah, that sounds interesting to me. I will check that out. Monk Lewis, Sam can remember how to pronounce Nomiki's name now because he is gone. He has a don't start with that. Please just don't mess with me now.
A mnemonic device.
I'm no longer, I'm no longer even reading any of that because it's going to screw me. Oh, yeah. Some people cling to austerity because they perceive it as responsible and adult. Tighten your belts, etc. Indeed. Gons, watch The Mask on Twitch. Okay. Josh from Tucson. Is Super Trump's V as good as WAP? Okay. Underpaid elevator operator. Jig Tapper undersells the effect of Trump's rallies and behavior by saying it's not leadership. It is leadership. It's just that he's leading people straight off a cliff. Tokyo Gouda. How's Isabel Gillies doing? Haven't seen her in a while. Also, Benji is better than Beethoven. I just reached out to Isabel actually the other day. Hopefully we'll have her on call in for the anniversary show. Jenna from St. Louis. If we have to wait 50 years for shit to get better in this country, I'm not gonna make it. Gen X. Train Boy. Can we get a shofar for Evo Morales' birthday? Sure. Bucket and a mop. Just got a chance to see that new Fun Half animation. It's wonderful. It is definitely awesome. Superman would be socialist if Bernie Sanders is the politician I've supported most vehemently, but he was president and screwed up half as bad as Trump. I wouldn't drive around in a caravan as a monument to my ability to ignore those failures. A lot of those caravans are done in blue cities to own the libs, and basically what's going to happen is it's going to drive out turnout. D over T. Although there's no subscriber button on Twitch, I would argue I'm the first Twitch subscriber. I became a member in part to lobby against my unjust banning in the Twitch chat through the IMs. I just became successful in this, but I'm also successful in supporting great independent progressive shows like yours, Sam. Stay based. Thank you. Much appreciated. Mexi Marine. You see the interview where Joe Jorgensen said she'd rather have Philip Morris making meth than in someone's bathtub? Have or will you have someone to speak how the Fed is artificially propping up Wall Street? I mean, we talked to Dave Dayen about the CARES Act. I just interviewed, you know what? On Ring of Fire, actually. I did a piece on that from ProPublica, I believe.
Yeah, one point it's important to hammer home about neoliberalism is that it's not just laissez-faire economics, right? Like the government interferes in all sorts of ways in the economy in order to, prop it up and make it go the way they think it should.
PCG Toe, would you be willing to vote for? But that is neoliberalism.
Yeah, some people think it's just like hands off, let the market do what it wants to do. No, that's not true.
It's we made these rules and follow them forever, please.
Exactly. And the rules just by chance are like, really suited to where we're positioned at the moment. It's as if like I was put in charge of being, ruler of the world. And I said, look, this is how it's going to work. We're going to be in a meritocracy. And at the top of that meritocracy are people who have microphones and can speak for extended periods of time and like the sound of their own voice. That's going to be the pinnacle. And then everything will be based on a certain merit scale based upon that. That's fair. It's the way that God wanted it. PCT Joe, would any of you be willing to vote for a representative that pledged to always vote whatever polls of their district wanted them to, regardless of personal or party platform?
No.
Oh, because those polls can be heavily influenced by corporate money. Like
if you're
with Prop 22.
Also, what if you're in a red area? You have to vote for the Republican because North Dakota polls red? That's right. No.
Carl Vandergest. Is the new cast member Eric Wareheim? No. What happened to Breonna Taylor's freedom? I don't know what's going on. We've got to check in on that. I don't know what the latest was in the wake of that case. I know there's registration numbers indicating a sizable increase in Republican registration in some states that are people are reasonably expecting increased raw voter turnout numbers for Trump. But how is that possible? Who are the sickos who didn't vote for Trump in 2016 who would be showing up for him in 2020? People who were, people who were, I guess, skeptical as to whether he was going to hand it to the libs and to people of color. I mean,
they wanted to see him deliver on those promises first.
K.R. McNamee. Jamie, why are you so pretty and smart?
Stop it.
Matt, My wife works for a small company, and one of her coworkers was exposed to COVID last week. Everyone at the company got tested over the weekend, but results aren't back yet. The owners are all requiring everyone to be in today, regardless of their orders to quarantine. Guess who they're voting for next week? Jeez. Like that should be actionable. In a like a normal world, like there should be a hotline that you call your state AG or a federal number. You know, like, are they breaking the CDC recommended guidelines? If somebody you've been working with, you know, if you got to go into quarantine and your boss is making you work, A, you should have recourse on that. And B, we should also have funding so that that business, if they can prove that this is a hardship to have all their workers stay out, which it very well may be, then they get funding to support these workers staying at home. Workers get paid, whatever the, you know, the margins that they're working on get paid. Sasha, I've been waiting in line to vote in Rockland County, New York, and I've been waiting for over an hour. I've never seen anything like it here. It's never taken more than a few minutes to vote. Turnout is crazy. Left is best. Abolish ICE baby. Trump is an idiot, but my mom is a nurse and said the hospital thing is actually happening. Her coworker's mom died of non-COVID illness, and the hospital put COVID on the death certificate to get more money, and now they're going to court about it. This is in Massachusetts, where she works. Send me a link to that. I'd be curious about that. I'm a little bit skeptical. Hey, Sam and Jamie, really enjoyed the conversation from a couple of weeks ago about worker co-ops. Just wondering if either of you have read Elizabeth Anderson's work on private government. Therein, she talks about the origins of the private sphere in political philosophy and bases it on the thought of early egalitarian thinkers such as Smith and Lincoln. Smith envisioned that most people would be employed in small factories, less than 10 people. And Lincoln envisions they would become self-employed as a homesteader. With neither vision, it manifests. All right, well, I will look into that.
Actually, we've had her on the show before.
Yeah, you looked into it in April of 2018, actually.
I will look into that in April of 2018, where we talk about private. That's what I thought. The quitter in chief, Charles Grodin, is still alive. You know, slandering his body of work is not a great idea. You know what? I actually read his autobiography. It would be great if you were not here right now. That's what made me so disappointed about Beethoven, frankly. TMBS is my jam. Son, your son Saul needs dog. Adopt, don't shop. How about I don't adopt and I don't shop? That's what I choose to do.
There's already 2 more pets that Sam wants in his household, so I think a dog is going to be a hard sell, guys.
Sam, that is why Asheville, North Carolina nurses have voted to form a union. HCA owns the hospitals in Nashville, North Carolina. And the final IM of the day. Beethoven is great. Have you watched any Jim Carrey movies lately? Check out The Mask. Good family content. Matt, Brendan, Jamie, good job today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know